Director Rolfe. Here. Director Diamond.
Yeah, here.
Director Hetherington.
Here.
Director Odette. Here. And Director Stevens is on Zoom under AB 2449.
And I'm here.
And he's appearing under 2449 for just cause due to a physical disability. Thank you. And then, Rick, 2449 requires that you disclose whether anyone over the age of 18 is in the room with you currently, and if so, the general nature of your relationship to that person.
Florence Nightingale is in the room, and she is my wife of 55 years, and she's been awfully good to me.
Thank you, Director Stevens.
Okay, are there any special orders of business? Modification of the agenda? All right, is there any public comments on the budget? Oh, sorry. Okay. Take it away.
Just make sure you can hear me okay. How's that?
Good.
Rick, can you hear me?
This is the best I've heard you ever.
Excellent. Good afternoon. Welcome to Budget Workshop number 2. Today we'd like to walk through our year-ending forecast for 2023, as well as the 2024 operating and capital budget draft. Then when we're finished with that, we will end up with the reserve and investment policies that we started out with last time. And if you'd like to follow along, you can use the budget and reference guide as we go through the PowerPoint presentation. And if you wouldn't mind, love any questions and feedback, but if we can wait till the end of the presentation, that'd be awesome. And with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Rob. First few slides here.
Thanks, Kelly. So on our first slide, Kelly just verbally walked through the agenda 1 through 9 that we have there on the slides here today. On the right-hand side of the slide is just a reminder that we do have a new strategic plan the board did pass in July this year. And this is the representation of key elements of that strategic plan, our 4 focus areas in the bottom right corner. And then, of course, our vision, our mission, core values, and guiding principles. And these all influenced our preparation of the budget for this next year. If we go to the next slide. Specifically, I talked a little bit about these last workshop, and I've added to these a little more yet, but I try to call out those key areas that are in our work plan for next year that's been approved by the board. To show those that kind of jump off the page as far as prioritization that do have budget implications that we did look at as part of this budget process in developing the 2024 operating budget and capital budget. And I won't walk through all those today, but certainly can talk about those at the end of the presentation if desired. Next slide.
All right, so here are our budgeted operating revenues for 2024. We have a from last year. I was not quite sure what to expect, but this is their estimation as of right now. Interest expense or interest income up a little bit. Our CDs and other investments have been doing better than they were, which was not great before, so we're getting better. Airside revenues up slightly, trying to keep that fairly static. This year was a tricky year, so I don't know as we're going to see like huge numbers increasing. Hangar revenues, other business, leasing, warehouse, those are all increased by the CPI. That's going to happen January 1. The biggest thing you'll notice on here in the box is that we do not have any AIP grant funding this year, so big change compared to this year. Next slide, please. And here we have our operating expenses. The biggest change here I think you'll see is that community benefit piece. We're trying to look through things, or at things through the lens of the FAA guidance and kind of the different buckets that we've been talking about and how the community benefit part needs to be called out specifically as it is funded by property tax dollars. Community benefit has, we'll talk about later on in a few more slides, but $2 million built in for a wildfire prevention program that we'll get to in a little bit here. And then the rest of it is a lot of our normal things that we do, like the air show and the TTCF benefit or giving, if you will. And everything else is pretty static. Interest expenses on the exec hangar loan, and then regular pavement maintenance, cost of goods is same. And then regular increases in payroll and benefits, and then operating G&A as utilities increase, as we do CPI or not CPI, COLA, and merit increases on the payroll side, corresponding payroll taxes, and the increase in CalPERS, which changes every year. Next slide, please. So this is a new concept that we've been talking about. So we're looking at getting an estimated 8.7 in property tax dollars in 2024. So the idea here is kind of how do we want to split up that pie, if you will. And I think right off the top, we need to make sure that we have the funding to cover truly the airport operating expenses. That's the big chunk in blue. And then the rest of the slices of pie are all the other ways that we give money to the community and what we spend it on currently, and some proposed ideas like the wildfire mitigation, that $2 million up there at the top.
Yeah, and if I could maybe just talk about the community benefit wildfire mitigation, $2 million, 23% of the proposed tax revenue use. In our last workshop, we had a discussion about other things the board was interested in focusing on. One of the ones that clearly had consensus across the board was a concept of engaging in wildfire mitigation. And without fully vetting out what exactly that is, we took a number based on feedback that we had last workshop and in an individual meeting since then, and plugged in this $2 million number here as something that we could probably build into the budget with existing funds or with property tax funds to enable a program like that. I have had a chance working with Director Diamond, and we had a chance to meet with the fire chiefs of the JPA in the North Lake Tahoe area and with the Community Foundation to discuss if this was to move forward by the board of directors here, what would that maybe look like? And so there's some loose conversations and concepts around that. So there's been a little bit of research on this concept. Just to bring it back to you today as something that we listened to last time. We've done a little bit of homework on. We haven't had a full scoping of the concept, but at least the initial indicators lead us to believe that this is in alignment both with the airport purpose use of tax funding and also how it might work with the agencies that are most directly engaged in wildfire mitigation here in this region. So that's why that's on here today. Certainly we can modify that going forward based on board guidance. But we were trying to listen to what you're saying, and that's how it's reflected here in the budget.
Next slide, please. So sorry, this is a little bit hard to read, but this is our, the pink column is where we're forecasting to end 2023. So net income of 5.3 million and looking like around 11 million in cash at 12/31. And then for 2024, you can see there's a negative number down there in the net income column, knowing that we're short the 3.6 million that we had this year in AIP funding, and then increasing the community benefit dollars there as well. However, coming into the year with the 11 million, we're looking to end the year at 6.2 million in cash at 12/31/24. And this is kind of another concept we've been playing around with of how do we want to allocate that ending cash dollars, right? So at 12/31, at the end of the year, after the audit is done and everything is finished up, thinking more about the bucket concept that we talked about last time, a bank account kind of thing, where do we want to put those dollars? And this is what we're suggesting, that we have the 2 million in the property tax fund to start out with the for the fire wildlife wildfire mitigation program. 2.5 to start off our nest egg, if you will, for the replacement reserve fund. There's 3.9 for airport operating fund, and 3 million for just to be in the property tax account right now. And the terminology, I'm trying to kind of change things a little bit based on the way the FAA, what verbiage they use, and they use more funds, if you will. So I'm trying to change that, and I'll make sure that all of our other policies use the same wording so that we're all on the same page and using the same words. Next slide. And then here's our capital projections from the strategic plan, and then also from the replacement reserve plan. So 1.4, some of these are carryovers from last year, you can see. And then from Hangar 1 wood siding down to the fuel farm, the bottom there, those are all off of the replacement reserve plan. And let's see. Yeah, I think that most of those are carryovers from this year that just didn't get done yet. Next slide. And this is just a graph of, again, where we fall into the bigger picture of property tax allocation for Nevada County. So the airport district is in the district piece of the pie, and we get 1.02% of that fund. And next slide. And then for Placer County, we actually fall into the multi-county specialty district, so the little smaller sliver of purple there, the 2.89%, and we get 0.564 of that total fund. That is the end. So I'm love to hear your questions, feedback, and
There were 2 supporting documents.
right. Oh yeah, you had in your board packet, there's the actual long version of the budget in the guide, the reference guide that goes through what's in each category.
Anybody have questions? Rick?
I do have questions. Is now the time? You're inviting questions.
I am inviting questions, yes.
When we get into the wildfire mitigation, I understand the 2 million. What I don't understand is how it would be implemented, how it would be approved, how do we solicit programs, et cetera. I know there was a committee for Measure T. I don't know how we would go about approving expenditures in that area. That's something I'm interested in. I don't know if now is the right time to talk about it. But those are questions on that one.
Yeah, I could field a little bit of that, Rick. Right now, we don't have a fully developed concept of how that would be implemented on a wildfire mitigation program. The initial conversation I have had with the fire chiefs in the North Lake Tahoe, Truckee area in the Community Foundation lead me to believe that we could develop a program with the Community Foundation and the Forest Futures group within the Community Foundation to set up something similar to the Measure T type setup, where you actually have a group of individuals, fire professionals, that would review how the funds that if we move them to the Community Foundation like we do with our agency partnership program, where that money would be overseen and distributed based on a developed criteria that we would put together and bring back to the board of directors to approve as a comprehensive policy of how this would unfold. So that work still needs to be done. There's a lot of conversations need to happen. Those could happen over the next 2 months here. I'm confident of that. If the board wants to continue to move in this direction to establish some kind of 1 year or multi-year program. I suggest multi-year program if you're doing work in this space, because trying to do things in just 1 year in the forest is very difficult because of the lead times with trying to get grants, with trying to actually do the kind of studies on the ground, the approval process, and the actual work. Those are multiple year timelines often. So if we want to move into this sector, I would suggest that we work with an entity like the Community Foundation that we have an established relationship with, that can oversee the money that we would move to them under an established program and process. Again, I have not vetted this out with all of the folks other than just initial conceptual conversations at this point to lead me to believe it is possible to do this.
I comprehend and understand, so I'm prepared to go forward with this on that basis.
Okay. And as part of the budget process, if the board's in agreement with the concept of this, we could approve, I would ask the board to approve the funding for this sliver of the community benefit program for wildfire mitigation, pending the plan and program that would come back to the board for final approval of actually how we'd execute it before we'd expend any funds.
I will keep going. The community benefit, that is the sponsorship number at 500,000, correct?
Correct. That's the TTCFs.
And my opinion, it's partnerships, not sponsorships, excuse me. My feeling it should be bigger, although we didn't spend all of the 500 this year, and you my feelings on that. So I'd like to see bigger and figure out how to invest more in the community than the 500,000 and really finish it. So that is my personal opinion. And those are all my questions on this page.
So Rick, on that particular agency partnership, since we aren't hitting the thresholds of the existing budget for the last 2 years now, I think the area that continues to be requested is for funding around kind of capital campaigns concepts for building infrastructure. And I think in order to address those, perhaps we should have a discussion in the new year about our existing policies and whether or not we want to modify our existing policies to address capital campaigns, essentially, which would be a whole different conversation, I believe, of how we would do that and how we would approve those and scope those.
That's about the height you wanted? You want to wait till he's done.
Rick, we're getting a lot of background noise on your side. Okay.
Yeah, the nurse brought somebody in here and they're talking.
I'm gonna push. No, I can't.
Okay.
David has a question.
I do have a question and a comment. I 100% support in modifying the language in 311 to be very clear about how the capital campaign thing works, because I do feel like it's somewhat ambiguous, and I think it has led to some frustrations that we could avoid. The second thing, the question for Kelly on the funds concept, we know that we know the concept that property tax money that moves onto airside cannot move back into non-airside stuff. At what point does that move happen? Like when you move money into that fund, is it then locked there forever, or it's not locked until it's committed to a project? Or how fungible are those funds?
Well, I'm trying to come up with a formula for that maybe it's a quarterly thing, but based on actual airport operations and what, like in a year like last year where we needed to use more of those funds. So trying to figure out what the right threshold is on net income or lack of revenue, whatever that piece is. So I'm trying to figure out what that is right now. And then we can put a actual process behind it and have a methodology.
Okay, but what is it though? Once it goes into the fund, it cannot go back out?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Which fund?
Moving from which fund to which
What-
fund?
Property
what-
tax
When
to
property
airport
tax go to air,
operating.
an airside
When it
fund?
moves over to airsides or airside revenue shortfalls, once it moves over, it would stay there. And
Right.
I think truing up on a quarterly basis probably would be adequate, based on the
Right.
seasonality of the different seasons we have here.
Right. That's what I was just wondering in terms of like if there was a, I mean, not to overcomplicate this thing, but if there was a holding cell for money that was not allocated until it was necessary or needed.
That's the property tax fund is what we're calling it.
Okay, so it would actually not.
Stay there and we move it out on a quarterly basis based on our needs to true up our operating.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. That's what I
But
wanted.
until then, it would stay in the more fungible account of the property tax fund.
Right. Understood. Thank you.
So this goes to the slide, the one that shows the 11,459,000, that the four pots of the airport operating fund, property tax fund, airport operating, property tax, I mean, if you want to bring it up.
Yep, that's exactly right.
That one.
Yep.
So that, while it's in the property tax fund, airport operating, it's flexible. It can move any which way.
If it's in the orange.
If it's in the
or-
orange.
Yeah.
If it's in the gray, it's.
that one,
It's movable. If it's in the yellow or
The
blue.
gray is the community benefit one.
Right.
So
And in the yellow,
yellow is replacement reserve, yep.
so is that yellow and blue or purely airport side?
Well, I think even on the reserve one, we might have two funds within there because the vast majority, probably 90% of our assets are on the air side, but we do have some that are on the non-air side.
Right.
That would require tax revenue to pay for the maintenance and upkeep, the reserve type of expenditures. So we still would have to have some sub-segmenting of these funds in that area. Reserve replacement.
Can I just remind to use the microphone? Because on the recording, we literally can't hear you guys speak if the microphone's not on.
Okay, too far away. So, I like this concept of these four pots, but maybe there should be five, in terms of the one yellow to show a distinguishing point between what's fungible and what's not.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're saying the same thing. It's whether it's a sub-account within that or two
Right.
different accounts, it
Right.
probably is cleaner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I have a question, I'm not sure, I know we're gonna get to it in the next meeting, but you've got something on there for down payment assistance.
Yep.
Where is that in here?
We do. We've got,
We have
Right.
250, oh, sorry.
if you go back to the community benefits slide, the tax revenue slide. One more, that one. Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Kelly.
There's 500 in there for community benefit housing, and so there's 250 and 250. The first 250 would be for the down payment assistance, and the other 250 would be to try to buy something.
Was the second 250?
To work with the housing JPA to either try to buy homes, master lease homes, create other programs that would be for all the employees in the North Lake Tahoe area and eligible for. Those are the kind of programs we're working with them now on to try to accelerate the acquisition of homes, and some extent even build homes. So that was, we're earmarking $250,000 for next year to still engage in those activities. The other $250,000 would be earmarked for creating, if the board approves, a airport employee-only down payment assistance program.
We'll talk about that in the next meeting.
Yeah, and that's on the agenda for the next meeting, yes,
Curi-
And so,
Go ahead, say.
this is conceptual,
correct.
and we conceptually are also talking about funding capital projects, but you don't have any money in here for that?
We've built money in here for the capital projects for 2024.
Where is that on the line item and how much is it?
If we go maybe 2 slides forward, there's a capital expenditures. Maybe one more.
One more? Two more?
There we go.
There you go. 1.4.
Yeah, this one.
That is not what I had in mind, actually. I was thinking of part of our community partnership program.
So if we go back to the tax slide, use of airport tax revenue. So we expect to get 8.7 million next year in tax revenue. And here's how we currently see breaking that out based on existing programs and the need for use of 53% of that for airport operations. So this is that slide that shows that. Yeah.
To my original question, which was we built in 2 million for the concept of fire and 250 for the concept of down payment. Where is the
500 is the gray slice there, that's the
Yeah, that's
TTCF.
what we
And
already
then-
give away.
Right, and then the yellow is the smaller than 5,000 one.
And I'm talking about the concept of another couple $100,000 for capital or whatever you call them, campaigns.
Capital campaigns, right. So we can build a number into budget now and address the policy around that separately, how that would work. So we could either build a number in as part of an operating planned expense for next year for 2024 to some number level. We can put that on here. And that can come out of property tax next year, which is getting very tight and difficult at this point because this is the current split of that. Or it can come out of existing cash reserves that we have now that we talked about allocating into different buckets on a separate slide. So it can come from two different sources for that concept for next year. So we can build something in there for that
I
concept.
think if
that the
we're
board
building
wants.
conception of fire and conception of down payment assistance, it should be in here. Because it's just a concept.
I defer to the board. If there's consensus to do that, we can do that.
Thoughts?
My first thought is that we should probably clean up 311 before we put money in there. We can always add money in later, right, if we want to. I mean, I get your idea of a concept.
My
but-
point is, if we include the other two, why are we not including this one? It shouldn't be,
Because-
shouldn't it be all or none?
It just seems like we need to clean it up first if we want to go down capital campaigns. If that,
Well, we're not
we haven't-
approving the budget yet, and we don't have any policy around fire or any even a
That's true, too.
thought process around down payment assistance. It's a new concept tonight.
Yeah, we do have, in this next meeting, we do have a process that we're have
Proposing.
before you. that we're
But
proposing.
today, we have, right now, we
Right.
have nothing on either of those two, other than the
That's
last
correct.
meeting you suggested it, and so they threw it in. So I feel like it should be all or none. Either put in all of our concepts or none of our concepts until we approve them, or clean them up, or whatever.
So if you go to the slide of maybe the previous one, it was the, nope, forward two, maybe. To the next pie chart. There we go. So this is the recommended allocation of existing
I hear what you're saying,
in
and
your
I
money. So
understand.
just so we get the framing of the size of the dollar figures, what I'm getting to at this point, Teresa. We're talking 5 million, we're talking 500,000 for a capital campaign concept is what I'm trying to get at. And where would that money come from? If it comes out of the previous slide, use of tax revenue, which is where it would need to come from, then we're slicing down the tax revenue pie a little smaller. So we need to adjust what the community benefit programs are in the plan right now, or take it away from airport operations. I think that one's getting difficult to pull more money from without adjusting the existing proposed numbers. The other existing money we have is this slide, and of course, it would need to come from existing property tax base cash that we have right now. And so what level of that is based on these slides. So it could be, let's see, it's, sorry, we got 2 million in there. This is more fungible on how big these different pie pieces are. So it could be anywhere from 500,000 to $1 million range, I would guess right now, just taking a swag at it if we wanted to plug something in for a capital campaign type concept, pending a policy discussion.
Two issues with that. One is, it should be all or none. I feel strongly about that. We should take out all the concepts or include all the suggestions. Why this one has to come out of this pie and the other ones get on the regular budget, I'm not clear.
Would it help if we took, I mean, the 2 million seems like it's an arbitrary number, because we never talked numbers last time. Can we say 1.75 goes to wildfire and 250 goes to capital?
Works for me. Is that,
I mean, does that
yeah,
satisfy
or we
what
should
you're-
take the 2 million off and the 250 out. That's how I feel about it. It should be
All or
of it.
nothing. I hear what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've just got a question about so policy 311 is what we stumbled on with regard to can we do a capital campaign or if we're whatever. So what we're talking about, like if we were to change 311 so that it permitted more leniency on the capital campaigns, this is not a different thing, right? This is just deciding that that 500,000 number should be 750 or a different number, and then we change 311. Or am I misunderstanding that we have to have then a separate thing for agency partnership capitalized?
Currently, if you change the language, working with Josh about policy 311 around capital campaigns, Josh, our legal counsel for those online, we're currently programming $500,000 again for 2024 for agency partnership. If we expand the use of those funds for 311, the entire 500,000 could be assigned to a capital campaign.
Yeah, that's not what I had in mind, but we're not there yet. We're going to
Right.
get to that.
So if you want to
I was
increase
thinking
that, right.
for the new pot of money that we decide rather than going through the community foundation.
I don't like that at all.
Okay, whatever. You guys can put the rules around it, but I'm talking about a different, it doesn't have to be within 311. It can be 311.5 or whatever.
But why wouldn't we just revisit 311 to provide the flexibility that we're
So
talking?
trying to put everything in its own bucket.
Yeah.
I don't know, Josh can help us with that, but maybe it's different language. I wouldn't want to give all 500,000 to anybody, or if it was 750, if we added to it to accommodate some capital, I wouldn't want to do that. I mean, a little bit to everybody is better than none, but that doesn't mean that we can't make a big difference for these organizations that have nowhere else to go.
I agree. So what exactly are you asking? You're
I want
asking
another
for a designation.
couple
on the-
100,000.
On the pie chart, and maybe we pull
Yeah,
it from somewhere else.
We could
I
add 200,000
agree.
to the existing agency partnership program. That's 500,000, it goes to 700,000, would be maybe the simplest methodology that I think gets to your point, that gives,
I mean, I don't want
if that makes
to
sense.
give 200,000 away under the existing policy without earmarking it for capital. I mean, I do think,
Yeah, with the caveat of that asterisk, that would have to come with a policy change, right?
correct.
Yeah. And we could do
I
that.
agree with Teresa. This is Rick. I agree that we should put something in there. It's a concept, not approved.
Sure.
Okay.
I think concept is great. I think we need to have some good conversation about this in January or so, but
Is it in January or November that we're talking 311?
Probably January, the new year, I would suggest. If we get the budget passed this next month, and then
Chris?
we give some time to put together some policy language changes. That'll take a little bit of time. Yeah. But we could, for budget purposes, we could increase the 500,000 for agency partnerships to 700,000 as a placeholder with the incremental increase with an asterisk on it, like it will not be expended until a new policy directs how it would be spended.
right.
Yeah. So we could, does that make sense, Kelly? Yeah.
Like
Okay.
the old
You could do that,
stars or whatever we used
Yeah.
to put
Right.
right next to things,
Yeah.
little triangles.
pretty much everything.
We'll
put
add
a
some
star
language
on
in the budget about it. Yeah.
Starred.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk on how to do that.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Is that, okay?
That's a good one.
It is good. Thank you.
I have,
Rick, anything? Oh,
Yeah, I have a question on the capital projects 2024
this one.
slide.
Go for it.
If you go to it, it would help me.
We're on the slide now.
Well, I'm not. No, that's not it. It's the one that had all the line items on it. Asset request description, that one.
Yeah.
We have that one on the screen here. I think you're seeing our Zoom feed.
That's the one that I want to ask about. When you get to the lower 7 items or so, and it says replacement reserve, there's about $1 million, maybe $900 to $1 million listed there. Are those the kinds of expenditures that would come out of our reserve fund that you're setting up?
Correct. Those are replacement reserves.
Well, that's the answer I wanted. Thank you, Kelly.
You got it.
I have a question on this, is that this correlates to it captured the 60 pages of what the FMP was saying needed to be done.
It's probably 60% of what our reserve study calls for 2024. The ones that are not in there are ones that we've looked at and have moved to an out year
Okay.
based on a number of reasons that we think we don't need to execute those next year,
Great, and we're going to do it.
which we'll do that every year, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
because we've had a facility maintenance plan for many years, and I kept saying, why aren't we spending the money and doing it? So I'm really excited.
Awesome, okay.
There's several, the main ones that we pulled out are the ones related around hangars, because we really need to look at a comprehensive hangar program here with the damage we have with existing hangars. So not knowing what that's going to look like yet, we've pulled those, the limited hangar ones that are in there, because we didn't want to repair something for something we're going to replace in total anyways. So that's pending further examination over this winter of all of our hangars.
Yeah, the majority of those were on the Phoenix hangar, which is one that we're trying to figure out what to do with.
Okay, so that's 661.
All right, are we done with this? I think so, thank
Yeah.
you.
And this is the only thing on the agenda for our workshop, is walking through this, so.
In terms of the budget reference guide, are we talking about that next, or?
We can, if you'd like to walk through the budget reference guide, we can walk through those. Those are kind of the detailed comments that go with the overall PowerPoint that add some more clarity on how different line items, either expense or revenue, were developed.
So in this, I mean, I appreciate most of it. It's, what I was curious is, I mean, we have a hangar lease rate of 4% CPI. And, you know, that's what CPI is now. But I'm remembering last May where we had a CPI and we gave everybody 10%. And then this year there's a 5% COLA, a 3% merit. PERS is costing 7% more, and we're going to have 100% coverage. But we're only increasing hangars by 4%. And there's something inherently off.
Do I need to leave the room for this, Josh?
Probably.
Fine, I'll leave.
You left flash on.
In the past, you haven't. This is not about a new policy. This is about airport businesses, you know, in my professional.
It's not
judgment.
specific to your particular hangar rent, but I guess
Right.
it would be if we're talking about changing
I think this is-
methodologies on CPI increase for hangar lease.
Right.
So the safest way to handle this part of the discussion is to segment the discussion on any anticipated changes to the tenant leases from the rest of the discussion. But I guess, Mary, I don't want to do that unless you think it's just a question about what the assumptions were built in and whether they were conservative enough.
Yeah, I mean,
And if it's handled at that level, I don't think, David, you need to leave the room.
okay.
Yeah, and I would say and Kelly, add as you like, but from my perspective, we're not doing a direct line between the cost of employees here and the cost of leasing hangars. Hangar lease rates are based on every 5 years we do a rent study, which gives us a metric of what we should be charging for rent for our hangars. Traditionally, we take that every 5 years to establish rent rates, and then as part of the rent rates, we have an annual CPI increase on rent rates. That is set in a different process and not directly connected to our operating employee cost here at the airport.
It's stated very clearly in the leases that those CPIs happen every year based on whatever the month is, and
So maybe David, if you could leave.
So,
Just to, yeah, it's just, it's like our landing fees, are they going up CPI? Our hangar rents? I mean, we did have a huge hit in May. We're having, here's another 15% on payroll. And hangars are only going up 4%. That doesn't seem to be balanced.
Well, on even on our landing fee, as we put that in place last year, it was directly tied to the cost of our operating our tower, which is a contract fee, and the cost of our pavement management plan. Which neither one of those are directly tied to airport district labor rates or labor cost. So those two will continue to evolve based on the cost of the tower and the cost of our pavement management plan. The other one's hangars, again, is tied directly to our rent study that we would conduct, which is not based directly on our airport labor cost.
Yeah, I did not look at the old rent study that was just done 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But even there, it was lower.
It gives a range based on comparable
Right.
area, airport, hangar rents, essentially, which in the region have gone up significantly in the last 2 years. So, yeah.
So we're all tied to lease, because if the lease says it's only once a year CPI, and I know you're going to be addressing that in
Yes.
future, trying to clean up.
As part of the hangar revitalization plan, we plan to bring in the board next month an updated minimum standards for hangars, a standardized lease for everybody to be upgraded to. And in that lease, I believe we're talking about still going with an annual CPI increase that's in there. But we could talk about the nature of what that increase would be every year, CPI plus something, or CPI minus something, some dollar figure or percentage. So there's room in that discussion that the board's going to see and approve to address specific hangar rates going forward before a rent study would be conducted again, which is several years from now, most likely.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're going to run ourselves into the ground with,
Right. We just keep subsidizing. And to some extent, it should be paying. I mean, there will always be a subsidy from the property tax over
But
to
it
the
should be
operating
a
side.
level.
And I'm okay with that. But to have a 15%, plus we're going to 100% coverage, I mean.
well,
all the-
maybe, that's in the next meeting.
But the point being, there's something, you get it.
I get it.
And I mean, we're tied to it because the way the leases are written, and there's probably 28 different versions of leases. out
Currently,
there.
yes, something in that neighborhood.
But I just feel very strongly that somehow either it's twice a year CPI, because we're on a weird cycle. Somehow we should be recovering the costs if we're going to continue down this road. And a 10% increase in payroll, I don't know what the answer is, but I do, because we're stuck with the leases that we are.
Yeah, but they cycle.
Yeah.
We could put a plan in place to,
So the next broad area to address lease rates for hangars would be when we do the next rent study. The rent study will produce a range of potential rents, not one figure. And so we can look at the range as it comes in to address part of this.
Because it's how many cents per square foot is, I forget, I didn't pull up my old rent study to look at it. But
so,
we are
we're
the market. This
we're not-
goes back to,
yeah,
we are the
and-
market.
It's not that we're short on revenue. We have sufficient airport revenue and tax revenue to cover our cost. With the
but what she's saying is as our costs increase, it will continue, the subsidy amount will get bigger and bigger because it's not keeping up on the air side. Now, I'm not saying we should change it, I'm just
Here's the
clarifying.
problem. It looks like a major imbalance between rent increases at 4% and staff increases at a much bigger number. But from a business point of view, in theory, what we're doing is looking at the market about hangar rents, and to a certain extent, they're not tied to what we spend on employees. That's our problem, and we need to face it. Are we meeting costs on the air side with hangar rents? No, you're supposed to charge market rent for hangars. The question is, what's the market? And Mary's point is, we are the market. I'm not sure where else we compare to. We certainly can't compare it to Stead or Minden or where the airports are, because they're a lot cheaper airports to run on fuel, on people, on everything. Even South Lake, they don't give the services we do. So I'm torn between just running it as a hangar business and tying it to employee costs. That's my soliloquy on the business aspect.
No, that's a good comments, Rick. I think the FAA's guidance is very, very clear. We've been going through this quite a bit with some Part 13 complaints about how you actually do a rent study, what it's based off of, and how you use that as how the comparables are created, and how you use that to create a range of potential rents for hangars. I think a lot of that is very well defined and gives us very tight parameters about what we can do for the rents that we charge for hangars. On the employee side, we are competing with a market in a resort environment to retain employees here. So we're competing with a market there as well, based on very different metrics than a rent study. But it's about keeping and retaining employees and compensating them commensurate with the local other employment opportunities they have. And of course, to benchmark that, we do salary studies. We're scheduled to do a salary study next year as part of our ongoing, every few years doing a salary study. Last one we did was 3 years ago, I believe. 3 years ago. And the economy has changed quite a bit since then. I think we're keeping up with it with our increases that we have, both benefit and actually salary increases that we have addressed in this forum in last year's budget and this year's budget. The salary service will give us another benchmark comprehensively across benefits and salaries to make sure that we are still maintaining competitiveness with other folks in this region in a very expensive resort environment, which, as we talked about earlier, where most of our employees can't even afford to buy a home. So we have real cost pressures here on the employee side, and that's what we're seeing with the increases right now. How much we can directly tie that to rent increases to offset that cost, I think, is more difficult.
Then I found my rental rate study sheets here from 21. And so maybe, and these are not CPI'd, so whatever these rates were probably have gone up significantly as a comparative. So maybe we need to do a rental rate study in 24 to get some real parameters of different airports, and because you're going to be working we're making our hangars nicer, we're putting in good floors, we're cleaning them up, but maybe we need to be looking at, I would like to see maybe money put in here to do a rental rate study on hangars in 24. So that
And
you
who
have
would
that
we
data, in your process.
Yeah, right now.
Who
Go ahead,
would
Rick.
we compare them to? Wouldn't we compare them with Aspen and Telluride?
And I have
Certainly
that.
not.
I would have to look at the previous rent study to tell you that. I don't have that in front of me right now,
I
Rick. But we could pull that up and share that after the meeting. At this point, discussing this with Jeff Manesco, our Director of Aviation, and we're looking at a number of programs right now that the board has discussed, and we'll be reviewing this next month. Hangar revitalization, a new Fly Quiet program, a new Fly Safe program. These are all major modifications, not only in their programs, the investment in those, but also how that impacts our hangar tenants particularly. Before we add a fourth one on there of a new rent study, I would want to get through those for at least a year or two before we conduct another rent study, which per our policies every 5 years. So doing it after 2 years seems a little aggressive. But at least, looking at that and when we do it, I'd say we're at least a year away from doing, in my recommendation, a rent study on our hangars. So we're not lumping too many things all at once on the management team here and our hangar tenants as well.
Could I just add, and I want to make sure just to put it in perspective, and maybe I'm viewing this wrong. So our rent revenue is 2.1 million. If we increased it by 5%, it's 100 grand. If we increased it by 10%, it'd be 200,000. So while it's a lot of money, next year you're budgeting 4.1 million of community benefit. We're talking about generating right now an extra $100,000. So I think it's an interesting ethical conversation, but when you actually put a dollar amount on it, I think it's pretty small. And I think as Rob's talking, as we're looking at all these different things, the conversations that we're having with our tenants, to get an extra 100 grand to do a rent study right now, when we've already had a number of conversations, I don't know if it's worth the $100,000 of conversation. I don't know if I explained myself, but it's 100,000.
Yeah.
It's
Fair
big
point.
picture. That's nothing at the dollar amounts we're talking. And I don't mean it to sound like that, but
Yeah.
it's what it is.
Well, I think it's also important to remember that that's not our only source of airside revenue. I mean, we already have, there's a lot of grumbling. At the pancake breakfast, I get yanked aside talking about fuel prices. And, our fuel prices are high. I mean, we're already, they're high. I talk to a lot of people who fly to Minden and fuel their plane. And that's a hardship on some people. So I think there's a balance. I'm not saying we're overcharging. I'm just saying they're high. And I think we have to balance it out and kind of go from there. And I just don't think we can tie hangar rents to employee retention.
Agreed, but it's a good point to keep in mind as we talk about the budget.
Yeah,
And
no,
the
I
coming up
understand.
for more employee money, not just the extra benefits, but the down payment assistance and all this stuff. Like it all piles on. And one other observation is that when we do a salary survey, we always adjust not everyone up, but anyone that's low is adjusted up historically. I don't think you've been here for that yet.
I haven't been here for the last one, but that's my understanding as well.
Historically, that's what we do. But when we do a rent study, we do not do the same thing.
We would, with the rent study, we would adjust all rents with the new rent study. We would.
So as our leases come up, we won't have a rent study for 2.5 years or so if we stick with the current plan. What are you doing with those leases and how long are they?
Our plan right now is to standardize all leases for the new year, so the leases are month to month is what they are.
So we can change the rent whenever. We don't have to wait for the next cycle. Because it's month to month.
As soon as we do a new rent study would be the justification for addressing rent rates, yes, other than annual CPI increase.
Okay. That's it for me.
Yes.
If the board's done on the topic, we can have Director Diamond come in, but I don't want to shortcut the conversation.
You are? Oh, I can.
Is that it? Are we done?
Once David gets back, we have other questions on the budget reference guide or the budget itself.
Where's the budget
Happy to take
reference
those.
guide? I can't find it.
It's one of the attachments, yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
This?
Yeah.
Got it.
Welcome back.
Life is lonely. So can I still afford to fly or not?
You can afford to fly, just not park your plane. Yeah. So we're taking other questions, David, on the budget or the budget reference guide that you might have for today's workshop.
I'm good.
Any more questions?
Not for me? You good?
On this one is what we're talking, yeah. Okay,
Okay.
Are we adjourning?
now we have a reserve policy,
Oh,
308 and 309.
Oh, yeah. Reserve policy.
Yeah. I have notes here, yeah.
Okay, does anybody have questions or comments on the reserve policy?
I do.
All right.
I'm in favor of doing this reserve policy as long as I understand how it's working. We're putting in what, 2.5 million? Is that the first shot?
Yes.
The first increment, 2.5 million. And then we're gonna take out, let's just approximately $1 million for the items that we're doing out of reserve studies or reserve policy for next year. What is the goal for the following year to raise it to? Because you have to at least replace that $1 million. Are we talking about just replacing that $1 million or adding more to it than the $1 million?
The plan is to try to keep the fund balance at 5%. So we're going to have to infuse cash into there as we utilize it to do the capital projects, but it just depends on what we do get done.
Tell me what the number is at 5%.
So for 2024, right now, we're suggesting 2.5 million to fund the balance plus funding for the actual projects for next year. So at the end of next year, if we do all the reserve projects, we'll still have an ending balance of 2.5 million.
So we're really putting in 3.5 million and spending $1 million next year
Correct.
to finish at 2.5.
Correct.
Well, now I understand it. Thank you.
You said 5%? 5% of what, the budget?
Of the overall reserve plan of all the things that need to get done. Well, it's like, 23 or $24 million of items that are on there. And so if we just want to get to 5% funded of that.
So as it goes up, we will want to increase that balance.
Yeah, the 30-year reserve study has that $25 million balance if we replaced everything all at once.
Yeah, which you
Not
might
likely to do that ever. So the recommended level that we're looking at is 5%, which is 2.5 million. But there are years where there's more maintenance recommended than others. And so if it goes up for the following year, we'd want to anticipate that to add some more money to that balance.
But maintenance is not reserve, correct?
Replacement reserve, yes.
This is
Not R&M maintenance, operating maintenance, not tires and oil, but actual things that cost more than $2,000 that last longer than 2 years.
And there'll be a little bit like we were talking about earlier, where there are things that were slated maybe for 2024 that we're like, no, we're going to hold on that because we may be doing something different with the Phoenix hangar, for example. So there are things that could cross years and kind of move around a little bit.
So, but you've got this 2.5 million, and what, 500 is land side and 2 million's is air side, say, because we're gonna.
Right, we'll slice it a little bit to
Yeah.
segregate it for
Yeah,
maintaining, like Wattle Ranch would be some reserve money, well, that would be different, but
so maintenance is not in this.
maintenance, R&M is not in the replacement reserve.
Reserve, that's cash we have on
But
hand.
this
Right.
becomes, but that becomes all air side. I mean,
Yeah,
it's long-term thinking.
Yep.
If we decide to do something broader.
Yeah, it
once
stays
it's
in that
over
bucket.
there, It
Yep.
can't be used for something for the community. So if we're doing maintenance, so we're doing 3.9 million. I mean, and we're gonna build this 2.5 up to 5?
No, I think it stays around 2.5.
Can it go
and-
down?
It can. It'll fluctuate slightly based on our spend.
I mean, can we decide we only need 1 million in there?
Oh, yeah, we can look at that every year, or throughout the year, right? It's a targeted balance, not
To your
required,
point,
right?
you know. if-
No, because once it's defined airside, if you.
Correct.
You could pull it out to do maintenance with it.
You could pull out, do maintenance, you could pull it out to, build a new hangar.
Saying we don't have to refund it if we have a different and bigger project.
Correct, on the air side, right?
Put 2.5,
We have to spend that 2.5 and only that 2.5
but not,
forever.
and we don't have to fund it another 2.5 next year.
And there could be years in the future where you don't have adequate funding to fund the reserves, but you have a balance there to still be able to do reserve projects is part of the idea.
Right.
So you don't get behind them, right?
Which is the reason I don't think you're going to be lowering the 2.5, because we're not going to need to in the future. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done at this airport.
Yes,
Agreed. We're just talking about how it works.
yep.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else on that one? I'm good.
Airport and property. So I'm just reading contributions that go into cash operating contingency reserves. Target, I still don't understand it, so to me, it's still kind of confusing, but if everybody else is happy,
Well, so, like, the 2.5 million, and we're gonna spend $1 million this year, if we don't want to, that means at the end it would be 1.5 million. We don't have to put the extra million in to keep it up there.
I'm good.
Okay.
And one of the other changes from the last month when we presented this first time was rather than creating a separate cash reserve balance, we would not do that, but look at our reserve replacement balance, the 2.5 million, as our cash reserve also.
Okay.
So, because we could use it if we needed it in a pinch for cash on the air side, as it's appropriately designated. But that's where typically our pension would come from if we had one. So rather than keeping two different balances, cash and reserve placement, we just look at the reserve replacement as also our cash contingency balance as well.
Because, there was, at one point, there was another board member who had said, what if the property tax goes away? What if we can't get AIP funding? I don't see either of those ever happening. So, we are funded, and having a reserve, it's, at some point in the reserve study, it said they wanted 30% level, which was a 6.3 million in there, and that's too big. So we have this reserve study that said 30%, right? I'm not comfortable with that. 2.5 I can go with, and like you say, there's flexibility in it. But I have these concerns that this pot's gonna get really big, and it's gonna preclude some of the options that we might have in the future.
That's not on the agenda today. They were asking for 2.5,
Yeah,
which we already have.
yeah.
From existing cash balance, we would assign it to the reserves, 2.5.
But the reserve study saying that we have a 21 million deficit, putting in 2 million a year, and they want to fund it to a 30% level.
That's if-
So in the reserve study, that's what it says, but we don't have to.
It's
believe
not making that recommendation. It's based on what we want to do as an organization. So we can adjust that level based on what information we provide them of where we want to be as our balance. The number they have in there is based on just an example, I would say, not necessarily where we want to be.
Right.
Given our cash flows that we have on the air side and tax revenue side, I think we have adequate cash flow every year. We're trying to reserve a little bit of that for specific airfield and non-airfield type of large capital expenditure maintenance. So we don't get behind on that like we currently are.
Okay, anything else on the reserve policy?
No.
I'm good.
Any questions or comments on the investment policy?
No. That's great that the C class is doing that, the Cal class. This is a good find.
I think that's it.
Motion to adjourn? Oh,
Is there any public comment?
Oh.
Right.
motion's on the table.
Second.
Director Rolfe,
Yes.
Director Diamond,
Yes.
Director Heatherington,
Yes.
Director Odette,
Yes.
and Director Stevens.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned 2:06.
Studies you're gonna.
When do we reconvene? 3:30?
Decide, whoever's sitting there.
3:30.
3:30. See you then.
Okay.